Hello, friends, and welcome to the U-Turn podcast. This is your host, Ashley Stahl. I'm a career expert, a speaker, a best-selling author of the book U-Turn. Get unstuck, discover your direction, design your dream career. And I created the U-Turn book and the podcast as a place to help you connect to who you truly are at your core. And that's why every single week, I want to bring a guest on with the intention of helping you expand what's possible for you, both in your confidence, whether it's in work or love, and just in life in general. So let's get into this week's episode. What's going on, U-Turn friends? It's Ash here, and I'm really excited to have someone on the show who I would relate to more than the usual guest, and it's Humble the Poet. He's an international best-selling author. He's an acclaimed artist. He's a social media powerhouse. If you have not checked him out on social media, he's incredible. He has a highly sought-after new book called How to Be Loved: Simple Truths for Going Easier on Yourself, Embracing Imperfection, and Loving Your Way to a Better Life. Humble offers insightful stories from his own very personal experience with love, as well as down-to-earth advice on the most, important lesson he's ever learned, which is that love isn't found or earned; it's really realized. So without further ado, thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever had a poet on the show, and that's so funny to me now that I think about it, because I always tell people I identify more as a poet than a business owner.
Mm.
And anyone who is out there putting their work in the way that you are, it's so vulnerable and courageous, and you've been at it a while. So I imagine that there's some version of you that has gotten used to it. But tell me a little bit about what it's been like to be this poetic presence and what you have going on in your life that's influencing your poetry.
Yeah, I remember when I wrote my first book on Learn. I independently crowdfunded it and put it out independent. And the biggest single contribution I got was like $1,500, and I thought it was a typo, and it was this very generic email. But it was hbsu dot com or something, and it turned out to be a Harvard professor,
Oh, wow.
and I think he was like their head of crowdsourcing, and I think he was excited at the idea of watching an artist kind of take the business side of it into his own hands. And I eventually went to Harvard to go visit him, and he had a quote at his desk that was Andy Warhol that said, "Business is the most interesting type of art."
Mhm.
And I think for me, that's kind of been this reminder of like your creativity is not just here for what you put out into the world. It's also how you approach life, and it's also how you approach business. And with every type of journey people go on, there's a beaten path that's beaten for a reason, and
Mhm.
there's templates, and then societal ideas, and then there's our internal software that kind of leads us in different ways. But there's no right or wrong way to do things.
Mm.
Every way could be the right way.
Mm.
So I think for me, it's definitely been that as well, and having these constant reminders. Talking today about things that are on my mind. I think the big thing that's been on my mind is the word authenticity, and recognizing that even from a superficial metrics, money, attention economy standpoint, like keeping it real is better.
Yeah.
Like it really is. And it may not get you the most eyeballs immediately, but it's the most sustainable because you're just being yourself, and you can do it forever.
Yeah.
And any games we play, the prizes are to keep playing. So
Mm.
if you are your authentic self, all you're obliged to do is continue being your authentic self. And I think that's really interesting as people get into this attention economy of social media, where you want to get the eyeballs, you want to compete for the eyeballs, and there's little tips and there's little tricks, and say some polarizing shit, and
Yeah.
or outrage, this fact's gonna blow your mind. You catch
Yeah.
them with a hook. You do
Yeah.
all
Wear
this.
a bright color so they see your video in the feed. Like, wave your hands.
Yeah.
Do you know, it's interesting you're talking about this, because I just came off of a month of vacation, and I visited a family friend who my dad's been friends with forever, and she's incredible, very wise. And she was talking to me about anti-aging and filler and all of these things that we do to, especially as women, but everyone, to resist aging. And it was interesting because some of her grandchildren came over to the house. We were in the snow in Utah, and they're like Disney Channel stars. So they have movies and all this stuff. And they were 17 years old. They had diamond bracelets on their, wrists. And I had no judgment on it, but it was more interesting for me to see how they were relating to social media, how much they were posting, how much they were putting on TikTok and stories. And it kind of was like a mirror for myself. I was like, what am I don't know if it's like my own judgment on myself. I'm like, I'm turning 36 years old next month. Like, what do I have to prove? Like, I've already gone through these eras of trying to be someone that I'm not. And like you said, it's just not sustainable. And I think in entrepreneurship, people think a lot about, getting to that first success. And they don't think enough maybe about keeping it alive, which is like a whole other, for lack of a better term, and a whole other beast sometimes. So what happens for you in your realness when you're in a season of not doing? Like, you don't have creative inspiration, or does that ever happen for you? Because for me, I have moments where I'm like, I want to keep it real. I have a business to run, and I don't have anything to say right now. Like, how do you navigate that?
Um, I mean, I don't think there's ever a time that I'm not, primed to get inspired. And I mean, moving to New York City is not, there's no shortage of stimulation here and inspirational. Uh, I feel like living in New York City for this past month has been like living in real life Instagram, just without the comments. You see heartwarming moments, you see crazy moments, you see entertaining things. It's just endless. There's so much things to look at, and it's distracting, but also stimulating. I think certain things have always helped me. I think one of the ones that helped me the most is you are most qualified to serve a former version of yourself.
Mhm.
So I think about that a lot. So um, I've been doing this now for 12 years, and I think selfishly, right, picking topics and ideas and exploring things selfishly for me to serve me, and then using my skill set as a poet, rapper, as an elementary school teacher. All these things allow me to put things into communicate with words very well. Um, that adds value for everybody else, you
Mhm.
know. And I think for me, that just keeps me primed on what do I need to focus on, what do I need to do. Um, so, for example, now the big thing, especially with books, is I wrote this book about love. The book was completed a year and a half before it got into anybody's hands.
Yeah.
Um, who am I in that 18 months is always interesting. And I
Right.
got lucky with this book where, so let's say, for example, I finished this book August 2021. The book came out December 2022.
Wow.
My deadline to like give it to the printers, like there is no turning back, was September 2022.
Mm.
So it's like 3 months out from it dropping. The day of the deadline, um, took a few shots of tequila and wrote the last chapter.
Wow.
And and the idea was like squeeze your sponge.
Yeah.
Like what's left in you. You're reading stuff that's 18 months old. What's left in you now? What do you want to say, especially around love? And it exposed, new things I learned around the world of love, and also as I was ramping up promotion, helping me reveal, ideas around anxiety, which has now become the new kind of my new central focus of life, which is anxiety. And probably the next book will be about anxiety.
Mhm.
And hence the move to New York. You want to research anxiety, come to the
Yeah.
city that's just full of it. Yeah. Uh, so I think for me, there isn't a downtime. There's probably just a less structured time.
Mm.
I'm always thinking about it. Am I writing it all down? Am I reflecting on it? Am I routined with it? Probably not. Um, but that'll probably happen maybe starting in the summer.
Mhm.
And that's when like it'll be my full-time job to live life with a notepad.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
yeah,
Beautiful.
write everything down. And then probably the winter will probably be the uh every single day. writing the book,
Mhm.
hibernating. You ain't have nowhere to be. You can't go anywhere anywhere it's cold or whatever. So I think from that context of seasons, but I think priming myself to have new experiences and learn, I think is kind of a non-negotiable now for me to be excited to be alive.
I love that, and I guess one thing that I get curious about, I wanna ask you a lot about love, given your new book. Before I even jump into that, I'm curious to kind of follow this thread on creativity. I think a lot of people feel like writer's block, and my mom always used to tell me when I was writing my book, like, "You don't have talking block." And so, I just think so I want to ask a little bit about like how do you channel creativity? Granted, I imagine that it's kind of pumping through you as an artist, but it also as a human, we have these days where we're very in our human bodies and we are very in our human limits. And so curious what you do to channel inspiration. Just having come out of New York, I'm thinking to myself, there's some fun places that I want to recommend you go, like poetry slams. Um,
I actually, without revealing too much, and got a place right beside Bowery Poetry Lounge.
That's so cool. I
Yeah, it was
really
a
wanted to
sign.
be going. I'm so bummed I don't live in New York when you're there because I didn't have anyone that would go. Like my neighbor who worked in business development was like, I don't want to go to a poetry slam. Like that's my jam. And I used to
Yeah,
drive to them when I was 16 in high school in LA. So yeah, creativity. Like obviously
yeah.
there's something straight to it, like a poetry slam, which is your own form of art. I want to ask not just about how do you channel creativity, but how did you put it out there and balance it with making money when you got started? I know it's been a long time that you've been at this. I find a lot of people feel like they need to abandon creativity in order to make money. And I know that's a matter of mindset, but it's also sometimes reality. I don't know. Talk to me a little bit about just creativity in general and earning. My friend, are you ready to climb into bed at night feeling extra comfy and cozy? If you are, then Cozy Earth is just for you. It was named one of Oprah's favorite things in 2018, and its best selling bamboo sheet set is both temperature regulating and incredibly soft. I recently got these sheets for my new place in Florida, and wow, I feel like every night I'm just crawling into an actual cloud. So there's no more scratchy bedding, no more sticky, sweaty nights, just breezy, beautiful rest. And Cozy Earth's bedding collection offers a variety of luxury pillows, sheets, blankets, and more. Get ahead of your spring cleaning with fresh new bed linens from Cozy Earth, made from luxurious, high-quality fabrics you won't find anywhere else on the market. I mean it, they are really amazing. Head on over to ashleystahl.com/cozy. That's ASHLEYSTAHL.com/cozy and enter the code UTURN YOUTURN at checkout for up to 35% off site-wide. Again, that's ashleystahl.com/COZY for 35% off your order.
Yeah, I don't think you need to abandon creativity to earn money. I think you have to quadruple down on creativity to earn money.
Mm,
Um, so I think we'll start from just from the artist perspective. I like I think it's Stephen King
mhm,
says amateurs write when they're inspired. Professionals figure out how to be inspired every day from 9 to 5.
mm.
And I thought that was a really interesting thing, which was, instead of hoping for kind of inspiration to catch you, kind of like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about in her TED Talk, like
Yeah.
it catches me and I have to run inside from my backyard and start typing, which is still happening, hold space for that magic. I think a lot about my high school English teachers. And I only learned this because the first book was self-published, but the second book, I was with HarperCollins and I had, professional editors and they really created a structure. And I saw the value of the structure. So it was like instead of just writing a book and vomiting out ideas, it was like, let's make a 30-page outline. So there's no surprises as to what your book needs to be about. Like start with an idea. What are you trying to say?
Mm,
So if I'm trying to say you are a source of love. Okay, cool. Break that down. How are you going to explore that? Well, I'll explore that with love for self, love for others, and maybe love for everything else. Okay, cool. Love for self. How tell me how you're a source of love with just love for yourself. And then start breaking down these different ideas. So it's just like creating a tree. And that's kind of like what your high school English teachers wanted you to do with your hamburger method for an essay or anything like that. It was really the antidote to writer's block is planning. So it's not free forming. And I think it's funny that you said, you don't have talker's block. We Yeah, that's a little bit more free forming, and I don't think the writing has to be. And so for me, it really was this time around, especially because this was me writing. The entire creative process was unsupervised. I finished the book before I found a publisher this time.
Mm.
Um, so nobody was supervising me writing this book. My second book, I had accountability the entire time, and they were checking up on it, giving me feedback. This time, I took what I learned from them, applied it to what felt right for me, and did it myself. And I capitalized off the isolation of the pandemic, so it worked out really well for me. So for me, it really was planning out what I was going to say. First deciding what do I want to say,
Mm.
how do I want to say it, and I would put on these big giant sticky notes, stick them on my computer, and then I'd wake up the next morning completely fresh and hit the computer before I did anything, probably even before getting caffeine.
Wow.
And I'd have these notes and I would just go in. And then you start to learn a little bit of a structure. It's like, okay, what else do I want to include? Okay, I should include a personal story here. I should include something here. And when you hit these walls, I'm like, wait a minute, can I be saying this? Should I be talking about this? Wait a minute, that's somebody else's story. I
Mm.
was like, look, we'll fix that later. We're
Mm.
not worried. Let's just get it all out. You
Yeah,
know,
because you don't wanna
Ju-
block that energy.
yeah, exactly. Get it all out. No one else sees this. No one else has access to it. If reveal some secret information, we're going to reread this eventually. So it's like with the right, treat yourself with the empathy that you're a 3-year-old when
Mm.
you write.
Mhm.
And then you can be a drill sergeant when you edit.
Mhm.
Then you can be, mean, condescending, whatever you got to be during the editing process. And I call editing killing babies
Mm.
because, that's exactly what you're doing. And my book was 140,000 words when I was done, and I had to cut it to 60,000.
Ugh,
So
brutal.
a lot of babies were murdered in
Yeah,
the creation of
totally.
this book.
I've heard that phrase before, and, I love that you wrote about love, and it's interesting because, we had Danielle Laporte on the show. Do you know Danielle?
I don't.
It's funny, like, you both strike me as so your own person in this space, and it's really refreshing to be around. You can people can feel it, obviously, and, I wanna understand on your end, like, what do you think people are not doing properly when it comes to love? Where are people missing the mark? Just based on your experience reading your book.
Um, I think the simplest way to look at it is we're all actually very versed and experts in love. Where we're mixing things up is when we start getting into the romantic quarters of all this love. You know, there are things that happen. When I think about the love I have for my mom, my niece, my puppy, my friends, my job, a city, all of that. There's so many parallels. There's no earning, there's no worthiness, there's no enoughness. Then when you think about dating, everything gets thrown out the window because now it's like, and then we start associating things that have nothing to do with love with love. Like, what do I have to do or say to you to earn a second date? None of that has anything to do with love.
Mhm.
That should be viewed the same way we view a job interview.
Mm.
There's certain, if you want to get to that next level, there's certain things you have to do, certain ideas you have to signal, certain, you know, concept you have to communicate. So I think what ends up happening is we start to think we have to earn love because that's what happens in this romantic field.
Mhm.
But you're not earning love. You're earning another chance to build with this person. The love is when you guys are done with the facades, done with the expensive dinners, done with the trips to Paris, and you guys are sitting in your sweats watching TV together. You
Mhm.
know, your feet in his lap or whatever. That's the love part. That's
Mhm.
what you're aiming for. And all of this is like a dog and pony show. That's very unnecessary to get there because the only way to create that connection is vulnerability. And putting your best foot forward is almost the exact opposite of being vulnerable. So I think that's the first thing. And I think also the second thing is realizing how much we kind of float through life, kind of sleepwalk through life unconsciously and make adjustments when we encounter unpleasant experiences. So when we're young, you experience an unpleasant situation with your parents, that teaches you how to be. But you're making these decisions at such a young age that they're probably without context and nuance.
Mm.
So, a parent got upset with you over something. You make the adjustments so they never get upset with you again. You don't realize that parent may have had a bad day at work,
Mm,
or may just not be feeling well. Like, there's so much additional context that matters in that. But now you decided, okay, well, this is the only way to keep mom or dad happy. This is the only way to keep people happy. This is how I'm going to act. And
mm,
then we kind of make that a part of our identity and our personality. And then that has us constantly wanting to either earn uh, or define what love needs to feel like,
mm,
and that's why when somebody makes it too easy for us, we're turned off,
mm,
or um, if somebody uh, makes us want to earn it, we may gravitate towards them because it matches with what we were exposed to as kids, not realizing that whoever raised us, they were imperfect beings and they were trying their best, but they should not be our role models for love. They were just our first model for love. And then everything we see on television is there to entertain us. It's not there to educate us. So you're watching Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, Friends, the Ross and Rachels. You're watching, learning about the Bobby Whitneys, all these things. These are just here for excitement and entertainment. They're not here to teach you what love's supposed to look like. So now everyone's looking for these fairy tales. All the guys are looking for what they see in porn. And it's all this hyper normal stuff that has nothing to do with anything in the real world.
mm,
And I think that's something that we really need to pay attention to as well, is that we're just constantly influenced by all these external ideas. And all of this stuff is really designed just to make money. It's not
mm,
designed to make us better people. And just building that awareness of being like, this isn't real life.
mm,
What is real life? What should this be? Because love is peace,
mm.
and peace would not make for good TV.
Do you want to get your daily dose of greens but not feel like you're eating dirt? This episode is sponsored in part by our dear friends over at Athletic Greens. And what I love about their greens powder is that they're not only carbon neutral, but they taste incredible. I started taking Athletic Greens because I really wanted to get all the nutrients and all the vitamins that I could in one swoop, and I just couldn't bring myself to keep drinking those celery veggie juice smoothie things. I just wanted something that tasted good and was good for me, and their greens are tropical, tasty, and yes, their travel packs are perfect for road trips and getaways. So you never really have to miss out. I've been on Athletic Greens for the past year and I just can't seem to live without it anymore. I've passed it on to a couple of friends and now it's become a staple for all of us. I actually look forward to taking my greens every morning. With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of nutrients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, your recovery, focus, and your anti-aging, all the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient, daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. I actually even put it in a smoothie sometimes. To make it easy, head on over to athleticgreens.com/U-turn and you're going to get a free 1-year supply of immune supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is head to athleticgreens.com/U-turn to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Now let's get back to this week's episode.
So, okay, this is an interesting point because a lot of my best friends are therapists and I feel like there's two different frames, right? Like when you're working on yourself, there's just looking at areas you want to do even better and then there's also being kind of problem centered, right? Like looking at the problems, which whatever the problem is, whatever the challenge is, it's effective to be having that awareness. But I think sometimes it creates a challenge in their lives where they're nitpicking or fault finding when it comes to love. Um, so I'm just curious to kind of hear your take on like, I don't know, what you've learned on the romantic side of things as someone who writes about this and thinks about this so much. Um, what does it look like to walk that line of accepting someone and loving them versus loving yourself and saying this isn't right for me? Um, I don't know. I'm just curious what comes up for you around that because, I'm in a relationship newly with someone who's very introverted.
Yeah.
And so people kind of will pass judgment if he doesn't engage with them, but he's highly observant. He's highly intuitive and he kind of takes his time to just see what's going on before he enters himself into a conversation with us, if I'm at a table of people. So, yeah, I'm learning that what acceptance looks like in this relationship with him, because in the past I'd be like, "Hey, you need to say something, you need to talk to these people," versus like, yeah, maybe he wants to stretch in that way, but this is who he is. He's just not a chatterbox like me. And it's been hugely revolutionary for me to realize I don't need a partner that talks to me all the time, even though I'm a communicator, I'm a thinker, I have so many different thoughts. So curious what your thoughts are on that. Not just my dynamic, but just accepting someone.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily view it as a line that has to be kind of towed
Yeah.
in between two different things. I think probably from a pragmatic standpoint, abandon expectations, um, and instead have intentions for
Mm,
other people or for you as a couple, and have standards for yourself.
mm,
And I think when we talk about this idea of people being nitpicky, um, sometimes I think often that's just because they haven't gone deep enough with what they want.
mm,
It's a the shovel is the word why, right? So it's like, she goes, I want him to be 6'3". Why?
mhm,
I don't want to stand beside a guy who's shorter than me. Why? And we keep going.
mhm,
And hopefully it reveals something that actually matters.
mhm,
Hopefully, and I think a lot of times when we talk about this height thing, um, very few people are going to be like, oh, because I care what other people think about us and I don't want them laughing at us, at us, judging us. Hopefully it goes the other way and they say, well, security. I want to
mhm,
feel safe.
mm,
And then we have the conversation of like, well, how often is anybody, you know, walking down dark alleys being surrounded by five ninjas and a 6'3" guy is going to keep you safe?
mm,
What actually is the definition of safety in 2023?
mhm,
Most likely it'll probably be financial, or making special accommodations to who you are. My safety is if, let's say I have anxiety attacks, I need a partner who sees that, recognizes that. None
mhm,
of these have you know, their height doesn't matter in any of these. So it's really about finding out that feeling associated with these standards. So when people are nitpicky, I think they haven't gone deep enough in that self-awareness and
mhm,
figuring out what's there for them. I think once we achieve that self-awareness with our standards, then we start to see the differences between a red flag and a special accommodation.
mm,
For some people, an introvert can be a red flag for who they are, what they are, what matters to them. Um, I have a friend, his father is a real estate agent. And I mean, to pay the bills, he's got to be a social butterfly.
yeah,
Um, but he has an antisocial wife, you know, and you could see for the betterment of the family, if he was married to somebody who was also a social butterfly, how that would benefit this family unit. So
mm,
that for him is a reasonable and understandable red flag if
mhm,
somebody wasn't social,
mm,
because it not only associates with his goals, but if he's trying to build a family unit, a tribe, a village,
mhm,
that takes resources and you know the more social his wife is, the more people want to be around them. Good things happen in business in that world.
yeah,
um but for somebody else it may not be a big deal. Like the healthiest relationship I know in my life is my sister's, and
mm,
he is very extrovert, she is very introvert. um Tease each other about all the time, not an actual conflict. She'll say, when we go out traveling, he wants to stop and talk to every single person.
mm,
He'll turn a 10-minute walk into a 40-minute walk. But that's it. Like, she's teasing him, but also they've had the communication and they're 20 years in where she'll be like, okay, cool. If I want to get this walk done and I'm not going to go with you because you're going to slow me down, he doesn't get offended. He goes on his own walk and is the social butterfly that he is. And she can
mhm,
go put some headphones on, keep her head down, and go for a speed walk.
mm,
Um, and I think that's the important part,
mhm.
recognizing that. So for them, it's a special accommodation that they made for each other. It wasn't a red flag,
I
you
love
know.
that. Such an important
And
distinction.
yeah, and I think I know I learned this, like, even like there are girls who I knew a girl. I used to sleep in the same room as my grandpa, and he snored, and it became a comfort thing. So I want my guy to snore. you know, for other people, it's like, it's a complete red flag if a guy snores or whatever. So I think it's really about knowing yourself specifically.
Right.
And that just requires that internal, you know, there. So I don't think it's a battle. I think if anything, doing one helps with the other, getting to know yourself, strengthening your relationship with yourself. Because I think very often in these surface level relationships is such a power dynamic. So
Mhm.
it's really about it's like I need to get my way to get my way, not that I actually care. I
Yeah.
don't care, like you want Mexican, I want Italian. I just want to make sure we eat Italian because my voice matters
Mhm.
versus honestly, it doesn't matter. We could have went and got Thai,
Right.
and I think that requires a level of self-awareness that takes work. And then, as I said, that word why is really important. So you set your standards and you're allowed to have standards.
Yeah.
You are completely allowed to have standards for whatever reasons. And whatever they be in the relationship, set intentions, pick directions. Just say,
Mhm.
hey, this is where compatibility shouldn't be the prerequisite. Compatibility should be the journey and the outcome.
My friend, are you ready to launch your own podcast? Now more than ever is the time to start. Since I launched the U-Turn podcast in 2018, I've grown this show to hit the top charts, and we've even been so grateful to bring in over 6 figures in sponsorship deals nearly every year. And we have amazing conversations with top leaders and experts, as you know, and I just can't believe to this day that I get to have this much fun and that the show gets to support my business with sponsors we love that we get to share with you about. I'm so enamored by the fact that I get to have this much fun and impact while being paid to do it, and I want the same for you. So if the idea of you doing the same, creating a podcast, monetizing it, and making an impact feels exciting and expansive, you're in the right place. And I want to share with you that my podcast launch course is coming. But in the meantime, I wanted to give you a complimentary, very detailed launch checklist filled with prompting questions to get you clear on your show, tactical action items, and everything else that you don't forget anything, as well as the creative ideas to market and launch with impact. So what I have here is more than just a free checklist. It's the beginning of your future as a fellow podcaster. I really want this for you if you have the inspiration I did. So head on over to ashleystahl.com/checklist and you can get this tool that's totally free. Again, that's ashleystahl.com/checklist for my free checklist to start your podcast and launch with love.
Yeah, beautiful. And I imagine there's probably gaps between people where it's like that just doesn't look like a journey they want to take together. But it's so interesting to kind of take a look at, is that a red flag or just a special accommodation? I think what a beautiful question for someone to ask. I want to ask you a little more about vulnerability because we've talked a lot about attachment styles on this show. But those of you who don't remember those episodes, there's 4 attachment styles: anxious, which is somebody who's preoccupied with love; avoidant, someone who the closer you get, the further they want to run; and then there's secure, which, people who are comfortable with conflict and intimacy. Um, and then there is anxious avoidant, which is the lucky 5% who are like, come here, go away. So
Anxious until I get you, and then avoidant once I have you.
exactly. So with
Mm.
these attachment styles, and those of you who want to do research on this, it's really interesting stuff around being formed when you're a baby. But uh, it's interesting. I was reading that while half of the population is securely attached, meaning that they're very comfortable with intimacy and they don't have anxious or avoidant tendencies, that most of the dating pool is avoidant, which it makes sense because even though 20%, 25% of the population is avoidant, afraid of intimacy, most of them are busy being afraid of intimacy, so they haven't made a commitment.
Yeah.
So around 40-50% of the dating pool is uncomfortable with intimacy in some way. And I think that there's something really beautiful about someone who wants to grow. And it's so important that people who are emotionally open and ready to be vulnerable and experience real love are met in their vulnerability, in their sharing. So I kind of wanted to get some thoughts from you on, like, what does it even mean to be vulnerable? Does it have to be through conversation? Like, people like you or I have a skill set of words. So we're probably going to create intimacy or connection through words and vulnerability through words. But what does it mean to even be vulnerable? And what would be your thoughts on someone who wants to learn how to open up a little bit more, but they're really kind of shedding those layers of being emotionally unavailable, of being afraid of intimacy?
Yeah, I think, vulnerable by all definitions is leaving yourself open to attack. You know, it's what are the vulnerable parts of our bodies, that could sustain injury, what's vulnerable, vulnerable parts of a fortress, it's always the
Yeah.
parts that can be attacked. So what we do is we avoid being vulnerable because we don't want to be attacked. And the definition of attacked at this point can even be judged.
Mhm.
It could be nonverbal judging. It could be somebody raising an eyebrow, somebody rolling their eyes. This is enough to just crush us.
Yeah.
And I think that goes back to our kind of primal ancient software of needing to please people because that was survival when we lived in small communities. If the community didn't approve of you, they kick you out and you die. So disapproval feels like death. FOMO, feeling left out feels like death. All of that feels like death. So now we avoid being vulnerable because we don't want to be judged.
Right.
I think we have to come to this reality that, hey, we're not in small communities anymore. Absolute complete rejection from anybody feels like death, but does not actually equal death. Um, we now live in these large communities of millions of people, and you can move 4 blocks away from where you live, and it's a whole different life and experience, and a whole new tribe to create and do all of that. So I think the first thing is to realize is it feels like death because it used to be death for like 40,000 years. But in the last 200-300 years, it stopped being death,
Mm.
being rejected, being canceled, owning all these things. It never leads to you physically dying. It just might be an annoying couple of days or a heartbreak or what have you. And I'm not here to minimize it if anybody's gone through that. Um, but avoiding that kind of is the reason we get there because we never create these pathways for love to flow. And those pathways are built on vulnerability. Vulnerability isn't black and white. It's not 0 and 100. I think that's the other thing. When we have fears around vulnerability, we think, okay, the goal here is to get to like TMI level,
Mhm.
just share so much information. And now, they're going to judge me. They're going to what have you. And it's like, no, you can be, you know, what I was taught through my therapist is carry 2 stories in your pocket
Mm.
that are vulnerable that you could share with a complete stranger.
Mm.
And even you don't have fear of judgment. One of my stories, as we were talking earlier, is losing my first dog,
Mm.
and my hesitations around getting another dog,
Mm.
and then finally, getting another dog, and a year and a half after getting her, post COVID, I got her during COVID, so she never got to go into the vet's office,
Mm.
or I never got to go with her, and then a year and a half later, take her to the vet's office, and see that metal table that I first put my last dog to sleep on,
Oh,
and having that moment, feeling it jarring, and
yeah.
recognizing that I had a trauma I didn't even know existed until
Yeah.
I saw that table.
Oh.
That's a story of vulnerability that I can tell anybody and not be worried or
Mm.
afraid. And
Mm.
I think when you have these stories ready, what you'll realize is not everybody, but the vast majority of people that you share this level of vulnerability with, they'll reciprocate that level of vulnerability.
Yeah. Can
Not everybody, but yeah, you're making it safe for
Mhm.
them. You're telling them that, hey, look, I just showed you mine, show me yours. And
Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Show you
yeah,
What a funny statement for what your dog story, but I feel like, and those of you who are listening, before we hit record, I was showing him on Zoom Joopy, my dog Jupiter, who he had a German Shepherd too. So,
yeah, I had
yeah.
I had a 140-pound German Shepherd,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh,
a big boy.
140, what a big boy.
He
My
was he was massive. Yeah, he was.
mine's 90. I cannot imagine another 50 pounds. That is just, um,
Yeah, he just yeah. I remember just carrying those big bags of kibble. It was ridiculous. But
oh my gosh, totally. Mine eats like, what is it? Like 15 ounces of raw, like
oh wow,
meat and like I don't know what animal, what's going on in there, and then
yeah.
kibble and all of his supplements because I have a deep fear of him dying, which you understand.
It's yeah, and it's a special thing. And I think even this, like us having this conversation, is connecting us deeper. We're
Yeah,
building a bridge, and
yeah,
that bridge holds space, right? And then if we have a conflict, we might throw a piece of rubble on that bridge and impact the flow of love between us. And I think that's where this is important. I think you can be vulnerable with anybody. You don't have to be TMI vulnerable. I have
mm,
stories, that could be 100 out of 100 in terms of vulnerability that we don't have to get to.
right. I love that. And you talk a lot about, people with love. And I wanted to ask you, just if you had any advice in particular for people who are looking to find a partner, because I love what you were sharing about why. Why do they need to be tall? My boyfriend's friend group created this funny little app amongst them where it's like the odds of a human existing with your criteria. And it's like the funniest app because it's like they're 6 foot and they're this and
6
they're
foot,
that.
6 figure. Yeah.
Yeah, like if you make six figures and you're over six, it's like 14%. And then if you're good looking, whatever that means, it just keeps going, it's like 0.00000. So yeah, I would love to just hear what insight you have for people who are looking to find someone.
Yeah. I mean, on the light side, um, ladies or heterosexual ladies who have these 6 feet, 6 figure, um, whatever other standard that's required from men, um, please realize that it is a very low number of men, and that's probably contributing to fuckboy culture because uh,
Right.
as a guy who fits a lot of this, I feel like the pretty girl now
Yeah.
because there's less of me than there are of them in terms
Mhm.
of who's pursuing this. Um, and it's not. And again, the question has to go back to why are these important? And and just even go deeper with, yeah, you want a guy who's financially stable because it represents safety. Go deeper because if he got his money from his family, that's not financial stability. You know,
Right.
that if shit hits the fan, will he have the necessary skills? Meanwhile, if you have somebody that came from zero and he makes 60 grand a year and he figured out how to do that himself, he's probably much more equipped to take care of the family during a recession or when shit hits the fan, or because no one, if the tap turns off or if anything else happens. So I think really going down these deeper situations really matters. And also how these people will make you feel is a really important thing. I think the other thing is recognizing that modern society is really, really, really um, butting heads with traditional setups,
Hmm.
which I think is fantastic in so many ways,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to amplifying the autonomy and voice of women. But with that is going to come the challenge of the fine oiled machines, the patriarchal setup existed for a very long time, and it became a wild oil machine. Not saying it was good for everybody, but is without a doubt existed for a very long time. The
Mhm.
transition of that is going to be um, uncomfortable for everybody,
Yeah.
and I think that's something to understand, that as we continually to modernize our world, but want to have these traditional ideals, um, the world's going to make it more difficult. So I think that's why we have this rise with every generation. Every generation is increasingly less monogamous,
Mhm.
and I don't think it has to do with a deeper way of thinking. I think it has to do with a reaction to the fact that we live in a world that's making it harder and harder
Mhm.
to find your swan partner.
Mhm.
I still think finding it. I'm not going to say monogamy as a umbrella term. I want to say a swan partner, like finding that person that fits you, finding that person, so y'all can be that cute old couple
Yeah.
where like actually your connection is so deep it actually impacts your ability to find other people attractive. Like you actually have, like, scientifically have eyes for no other.
Mhm.
That is possible, but I think it was way easier when you lived in a village of 100 people and you were given an arranged marriage and y'all just grew together and y'all
Yeah.
grew up together, and that became your person and that became an extension of you. I think in this world of Instagram and dating apps and all of that, um, the environment is out to get you to make it more difficult.
Right.
And have empathy for that, have grace for yourself for that. And what I would say is, and this is advice for anything anybody wants to accomplish, nothing's going to happen passively anymore.
Yeah.
If you want to be a professional athlete, devote your life to it. If you want to find a real life partner, devote your time and your life to it. Be extremely intentional.
Mhm.
And then the debate me and some of my friends are having is like, I think the challenge for some men who want to find a swan partner is how easily we could get hooked into women who we know aren't the right women for us
Yeah.
because they're hot or
Yeah.
because of whatever.
Yeah.
So it's, like as my therapist said, like your goal is to, as quickly as possible, like sever those connections. Like, the
Yeah.
moment this isn't for you, like hey, I don't think we're on the same page. It's really nice to meet you. And I think for men, I can only speak 'cause I'm a man, a heterosexual man. I'll overlook those incompatibilities if she smells nice and she's pretty, and it'll bite me in the ass 2 weeks later, anyways, and
Yeah.
I'll learn my lesson that way. But I think the whole thing is like, if you can't, the question me and my friends have been asking, like, if you can't find your person, is it okay to have fun in between? And I think that's a debate that I'm not going to answer either. Um, because as I said, I think the environments that we're in, our grandparents weren't living in cities of 11 million people. Um, Access to Instagram, access to dating apps, access to this belief that there could be something better there, and that
Yeah.
subconsciously seeps into us. Um, so I would say for women, go to the smaller towns if you want to find a guy who still has those smaller town ideals and understandings. But also you have to be intentional. You have to be really intentional, really clear with your intentions and your standards, and devote time, energy, and resources into it. I think that's probably the best way to do it. Um, Knowing that the world is not on your team, your environment is not on your team. They're not. Um, our society is an economic engine, and it's not in their interest to have you uh, just simply find your life partner and being so in love with them that you don't need that expensive fairy tale wedding, and you don't need those overpriced divorce lawyers, and you don't need to go get married again to make up for the last one. That's the society that we live in now.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, be intentional, and realize no one's on your side. These apps aren't designed to make you find a partner. These apps are designed to keep you on the app.
Well, this reminds me a lot about, like, what does it really mean? What is love? And I want to ask you for your definition because as I'm thinking about partnership and what you're sharing, it feels like, is there really one, is it about finding the right person or is it about choosing each other and creating love together? Because it's kind of like the difference between like that hot person that you kind of think about, like the Phantom X, but and then the person you're with, it's like the person you're with is building a castle with you, and it takes time to build a castle, and you can't replace time with anything. You just
Hmm.
can't, and so it's like, I don't know, how do you define love for people who are listening to your words and thinking to themselves like, "All right, maybe this is the year that I actually not only read this book, but step into finding a partner and being serious about it and more intentional."
Yeah, I don't think it's finding the right person versus finding a person you build with. The person who wants to build with you is the right person.
Mm,
Um, I think the more you can abandon romanticized ideas, the better off you are. I'm not here to argue soulmates, but if you think there needs to be this magical spark when you meet a person, there's a lot of science showing that that spark is actually a warning sign to run the other way, because they're
mm,
probably triggering old trauma that you have, and you find them attractive because they feel familiar. The same way we go back to the same junk food when we're having a bad day. He might just be reminding you of your dad,
mm,
and that might not have been a healthy relationship.
mm,
So don't chase the spark. And the relationships we build are way more important and more successful than the relationships we have. So I think it's really about and recognizing that with everything we have in life, the progress comes from the unsexy work. If you're a professional athlete, yeah, you play the game and make amazing shots and do all that cool stuff, but it's really you in the gym doing the repetitious work while no one's watching. It's going to be the same thing in a relationship. Relationships are work, endless work and labor, and the rewards are moments. They're not happily ever after.
mhm,
They're moments in between the bullshit. They're moments in between going to work. And my definition of love is I love Naval Ravikant's definition, which is love is what exists when all other emotions cease to be there.
mm,
To me, which feels like peace.
mm,
And so, because that's what I feel when I was a little kid cuddling my grandma. That's what I feel like when my puppy's sitting in my lap. That's what I feel like when somebody sees me. They
mm,
say something that makes me feel seen. I feel peace. I
mhm,
feel, and I think that's what love actually is. It's not a roller coaster. It's not the ups and downs. It's not the cat and mouse. It's not Ross and Rachel. You
mhm,
know, it's peace. It's not wanting anything else. It's nothing else even mattering, and that comes through work.
mm,
That really comes through work. That doesn't come to a diamond ring that costs 2 months' salary. It doesn't come through big trips to Paris. It doesn't come through fairy tale weddings that that will look nice on the gram. It'll come from feeling good, not looking good.
Mm,
And I think that's the really important thing here. So having that intention and realizing you can build with anybody. Um, some people will just make it easier than others based on where they're at, and based on how your baggage aligns, and based on everything else, and how comfortable they are being vulnerable, and how easy it is for them to see you, and how easy it is for you to see them.
mm,
And that just means, as I said, like, cutting out the facades,
yeah.
focusing on vulnerability from day one. I just saw this morning actually a spoken word poem from a woman, and it's just really done really well. And the whole poem is about having sex first,
Mm,
like not even on the first date, having sex first,
mm,
and talking about the detriment of the idea that that is the most valuable thing a woman provides.
mm,
Saying you getting between my legs is not access to my soul. It's not access to my mind. It's not access to my brain. And if anything, seeing if you stick around after is a bigger sign than making you hold off. And I thought it was just, the way she framed it, she made it very empowering for women, but also
wow.
very challenging to counterintuitism, um, of what we're taught in kind of this cat and mouse game of like, guy has to put his best foot forward to build a level of trust, interest, and safety for a woman to decide if he's worth having sex with. Guys spend so much time doing that it isn't until the woman has made it crystal clear that she's into him, which for most of us single-celled cavemen means having sex, then he begins to assess if she's even a good fit for him.
Mm,
And I think that in itself becomes an issue because we're playing all these games before we're even seeing if this is somebody I want to build with.
mm,
And that's, I think, what makes things unfortunate. You combine that with the fact that we have this illusion of alternative options everywhere else. And we have this kind of skewed kind of balance when it comes to gratification, where men don't get external gratification,
mm,
so may participate in less than ethical behavior to know they still got it,
mhm,
and whereas that might not be the same thing for a female who could still be in a committed monogamous relationship, but just still get little ego strokes walking down the street or checking their DMs or something. And I think all these dynamics don't have conversations around them. And the conversations that you're seeing on social media that are getting the most likes are not, those are polarizing ones. Those
mhm,
are what is a high value man? What is a high value woman? And it's like this idea that humans can have value.
mhm,
It's like, no, you can't measure a human in terms of enoughness or
mm,
worthiness or value. Love is always around us. The work that we have to do, the analogy I use is love is a breeze. The work that we have to do is open the sail.
mm,
And just recognize the behaviors that we have, whether we're opening or closing our sail to the love that's already there.
mm. Okay, so my final question for you, unless there's something else you can share that feels present, is you tell people not to fall in love with potential, and I think that's so huge. For me, I always get confused on like what is potential versus just two people who are growing, Like when someone asks me, "Can you do better?" It's like, ugh, if I say, "Yeah, I'm happy to work on that." I guess it's like you said before, there's no line, but I think sometimes it's hard to balance being a growth oriented person and wanting someone to change. So, how do you navigate or what do you have to share around this idea of not falling in love with people's potential?
So I think the first thing is what I say is you can fall in love with potential, but it has to be your own.
Mm,
So that's the potential you're allowed to fall in love with. Somebody else's potential, you can't. And the reason for that is you're by default denying what's in front of you and not accepting what's in front of you. Um, and I don't think this in any way, shape, or form butts heads with people who have growth mindsets. I think
mhm,
what we have to recognize is we are constantly moving. So this is where we have to get rid of words like balance. If you are actually physically balancing in life, it's a moment. You balance on a tightrope. It's a moment. You don't just establish balance and then lock it in. So I like the word harmony, finding a harmony in things, and then compensating accordingly to if you need more highs, you need more lows. So what I would say is I like using the video game analogy, which is you buy a video game. The goal is to complete the video game, but you want to enjoy every single moment while you play.
Yeah.
It's not just about conquering the video game and skipping straight to the end, because then you would feel like it was a waste of money. You want to enjoy every step of the way, but you're only happy if you're making progress. So you and your partner can be making progress. That's setting an intention.
Mm.
Set a direction for you and your partner that you guys both mutually agree on, whatever it is, and head in that direction. But
Mm.
love what's in front of you. Love what's in front of you and be happy that you guys are going somewhere together.
Mm.
Versus saying, well, if she only learned how to communicate better, things will get better. So, she'll work on that. And it's
Mm.
like, no, if she's not communicating to you well now, like it's not like you gotta love what's in front of you. And that's not living up to your standards now. It isn't gonna do it later. I think everybody listening to this who's been through a breakup, you know, the vast majority of you can own up to the fact that what the final, nail in the coffin was probably something you noticed in the first 3 dates.
Yeah. Sh-
And, yeah, so that's what don't fall in love with potential is. It's not going to go away. People
Mhm.
don't people don't change for anybody. They change, but they don't change for anybody. They change for themselves. So you are climbing a mountain. All I'm saying is enjoy the view while you climb, because realize that you are moving. You're either rolling down the hill or you're going up the hill. There is no stagnation. There's no being happy with where you are. There's enjoying where you are as you move. But there has to be, as I said, it's just abandoning this idea of perfect. So when people say, "Can you do better?" Just like is somebody more perfect,
Mhm.
abandoning that idea and really being like, "No, like, are we making progress?"
Right.
And celebrate the progress. Like you go to the gym, you'll make the most progress at the gym if you enjoy the workouts.
That almost makes me wanna ask you about trust because, like, progress is, like, a very real feedback that
Yeah,
there's something is moving that matters to someone,
yeah.
hopefully positive progress. So, I guess what I would imagine people are wondering is, like, how do I trust the progress? What if it's just now? And I'm guessing the answer is, like, there is no way of knowing if they're gonna progress forever, or maybe there is. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, shit happens. Like shit
Right.
really happens. I know a
Yeah.
couple. Oh man, like this is yeah, I know a really sweet couple. Two guys and 13-year difference. But
Mm.
they lived together 3 years, got married, one of the most beautiful marriages I'd ever seen. The older one, was a clear breadwinner, had a really good job, high level exec at a high level company. The young one was like low level, getting into the entertainment space as a manager and what have you. The older one, over the course of them being married, over the course of maybe 4 or 5 years, the older one quit his job, tried to start his own business, and it failed.
Mm.
The younger one went from being a junior manager to starting his own firm to selling his own firm. So
Wow.
the power dynamic
Shifted.
shifted over those years through circumstance, and it led to a divorce.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That interesting how, like, someone feeling maybe smaller, I don't know what I can't speak
yeah,
but big, like, some relationships are kind of built on this idea of, like, you're over here and I'm over here, and our relationship won't exist if this power dynamic or gap doesn't exist. I mean, again,
I
it's
think sometimes it's not even expressed.
yeah.
I think sometimes it's like, oh, like this is how it is,
Yep.
and I like how it is. I pay the bills and he doesn't, and it's cool, and he does these things, and and that this is how it is, and we kind of expect things to stay like that forever. And I think with this story specifically, I just think it was just a combination. Like they both had very extreme luck in the opposite directions. Like he gave up, like the older one giving up these high end jobs to start his own business because his confidence was that high, had his business fail. The younger one, literally being at the bottom of the totem pole, created his own business and sold it for a gang of money all within that 5 years. I think that's not a story that's very common
Yeah.
with two people. And I think that really messed the dynamic up where maybe they both didn't think the other would change. I don't know what the internals of their relationship were, but I do know like it was unfortunate to that point where I do believe, I mean, even from a divorce standpoint, I believe there may not even been a prenup because the older one maybe he didn't mind. And then when there was a divorce, the older one got more from the younger one. Like
Wow.
it's an interesting, as I said, like this world, this world
Yeah.
that we live in, which is heavily based on economic engines.
Mhm.
Divorce rates go up when economic uncertainty is high.
Yeah.
So it's these relations, like love isn't the glue. Like,
Yeah.
please realize love isn't the glue that keeps a marriage. A marriage is a legal partnership, it's a financial partnership, it's a whole bunch of stuff. So I think for me, it's not about trusting. It's about having those conversations. It's about
Mhm.
because I think they probably never had the conversation because they probably just assumed it wouldn't happen. Like he had 12 years on him. Things would have,
Right.
we don't have these conversations about what if I get in a car accident and I'm, a quadriplegic? What if all of these different situations, we just don't talk about them. We don't deal with them until they happen. Now we're reactive and not responsive.
Right.
So I think it's not about trusting.
Mhm.
There's this quote that the bird lands on the branch and doesn't trust the branch not to snap. It trusts its wings that if the branch snaps, it'll fly.
Yeah.
So it's like we have to, and this is where the cliche hope for the best, prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
What we generally do in this society is we hope for the best, prepare for the best, and then freak out when we experience the worst.
Kind of reminds me of this finance class that I took in college, where the professor was talking about how, like, when an economic downturn comes, it's kind of like people are swimming in the ocean naked, and you don't really know who's not wearing pants until the tide finally pulls up and people are exposed. Yeah, it's like hope for the best, plan for the best. I love all of your wisdom, and I know you've been at it a long time. I'm so bummed I'm not in New York anymore to go to poetry slams with you because I was dying for
I mean,
someone
you
to
can
join
always come
me.
back. You can
I'm
always
gonna
come
be
back.
back. I'm gonna be
Yeah.
back, and I will be messaging you that we need to go. And what can you? Where can everybody get started with you? I'm imagining your book is everywhere where books are sold, but is there anything around finding you that would be helpful for everyone?
Yeah, the book is called How to Be Loved, by Humble the Poet myself, and it is available everywhere books are sold. If you can't find it, you can go to humblethepoet.com/love. And but you can find it Amazon, Barnes and Noble. If you're in Canada, Indigo, Waterstones in the UK. It should be everywhere that books are, and there's also an audio version on Audible, so you can definitely check that out. I'm probably most active right now on Instagram at Humble the Poet, and that's probably a great place. Or you can go on my website humblethepoet.com.
Thank you so much again for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning into the U-Turn podcast. And thank you again so much for our sponsors. We are here because of you. And to our listeners, thank you for checking out our sponsors. We always pick people and brands that we trust and we believe in. And just for listening to the show, writing your reviews on the Apple app, and just being willing to make your own U-turns. We'll see you next week.